right now we have Justice Clarence Thomas, who was just released from the hospital last week, returning to the Supreme Court oral arguments. In his, in his home situation, we got some problems because it appears that his wife will be hauled before Congress in no time. Per CNN, the 1-6 committee will be reaching out to Virginia Ginni Thomas about her text message exchange with Mark Meadows, that's President Donald Trump's former White House chief of staff. CNN reports this specifically. The committee has had ongoing discussions about Ginni Thomas, and CNN reported last week that it has in its possession 29 text messages that show her pleading with Meadows to continue the fight to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. Now, here is a quick recap of the gist of Ginni's many messages with Mark Meadows, in case you forgot from last week's breaking news. In text messages to Meadows, Ginni Thomas called Election Day a heist and repeated debunked theories about evidence of election fraud. Thomas actively weighed in on the makeup of Trump's legal team with a particular focus on ensuring that Meadows helped Sidney Powell be the lead and the face of the team. She weighed in directly on legal strategy, saying sounds like Sidney and her team are getting inundated with evidence of fraud. Make a plan, release the Kraken, and save us from the left taking America down. Ooh, that is a lot to say, especially for a woman who is the wife of a Supreme Court justice. But if you know Ginni Thomas, you know that she is a conservative activist. Now, she recently revealed that she did attend Trump's Stop the Steal rally on January 6th, even though she said she didn't participate in the insurrection or in planning it. Well, I'd like to know, Dina, what do you think in terms of her text messages? Do they seem to undermine this claim that she had no role whatsoever in planning the 1-6 attack on the Capitol?
I absolutely think you're right. Yes, I mean, these text messages are very incriminating. I mean, she's talking to the chief of staff and really urging for them to continue to try to overthrow this election, which is rightly, people are very shocked about this because she is the wife to our third, a member on the third branch of government, the one that we hoped would stop something, right? If the other two branches kind of got in cahoots about it. So this is really serious. And I do think that the committee is going to end up subpoenaing her because in one of those text messages, she mentions that she had a conversation with her best friend. And evidently, they both, her and her husband, have used that term to describe each other. They now have a duty to find out if she is indeed talking about him. So this is gonna get, talk about, separate powers. This is gonna get very interesting if she decides not to follow her subpoena and it gets issued to the Department of Justice. It goes up to the court where her husband is, where theoretically he doesn't have to recuse himself. We are definitely going into some uncharted legal territory here.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the Trump administration, everything associated with them has been uncharted legal territory, in part because it's been so damn corrupt. And we know that Ginni Thomas's text messages with the White House, well, they raise a conflict of interest issue as far as it concerns, which Dina did note earlier. Because we have Clarence Thomas sitting on the US Supreme Court, and he has been involved in cases that involve things like the 2020 presidential election and January 6th, cases in which Thomas probably should have recused himself. So what we do know is that in February 2021, Justice Thomas wrote a dissent after the majority declined to hear a case filed by Pennsylvania Republicans that sought to disqualify certain mail-in ballots. In January 2022, Thomas was the only justice who said publicly that he was against allowing the release of records from the Trump White House related to the January 6th attack. And if I recall correctly, I believe the petition from Trump's party that went up to the US Supreme Court was directed directly at Judge Thomas, which says a lot. And we also know that several Democratic lawmakers have been saying a lot for when it comes to calling out the impropriety of this situation. Amy Klobuchar, she said this is a textbook case for removing him, referring to Justice Thomas, recusing him from the January 6th related decisions. The entire integrity of the court is on the line here. Also, Senator Roy Wyden, Democrat from Oregon, said judges are obligated to recuse themselves when their participation in a case would create even the appearance of a conflict of interest. A person with an ounce of common sense could see that bar is met here. Thomas's conduct on the Supreme Court looks increasingly corrupt. Indeed, it does. People already have very little faith in our US Supreme Court after seeing all the political actions and activities they're taking, especially when they are straying from precedent to come up with some kind of ruling and result that favors the right wing. And now to have Ginni Thomas text messages leaked showing that she was in cahoots with the White House, and to see Justice Thomas continue to stay on these cases and have been the lone dissenter or the lone objector in certain cases, it really tells us that there is such an incestuous relationship in our government that we do not have 3 independent parties at all. Dina, your thoughts?
I don't know if he, it's hard because right now the Supreme Court does not have an ethical rules of conduct like the other federal judges. So it's Chief Justice Roberts is in some ways limited by what he can do. If that were in place, he could, that could trigger, a forcing Justice Thomas to recuse himself. So I think what could happen is if Justice Thomas continues to not recuse himself, the outcry is going to get so loud that he may very well get impeached, which of course, the Democrats wouldn't mind that because that would allow them to, put in a more liberal justice. That is gonna be a huge fight if that happens. That's only happened one other time in our history where somebody was actually impeached and removed. So, that will be interesting. Or this might, urge Chief Justice Roberts might decide to go ahead and put in an ethical rules of conduct in order to kind of stave off this growing political momentum and allow them to, self kind of discipline themselves. But I think one of the two is going to happen because we've never had such a politicized Supreme Court. We usually in the past have had a majority of senators vote them in. So this is becoming more political. One of the two is going to come to a head here.
Yep, I absolutely agree. They've got a problem.